Greetings, I'm Salvador Cordova. Welcome to the Evidence and Reasons for the Christian Faith video channel. This segment is part 2 in a series on the problem of evil and the Christian faith. The problem of evil might be framed with the question, why would a good God create a world that is full of evil? For many who are doubting Thomases and non-Christians, this question is the biggest stumbling block. I can say this was the case in my own personal life when I was struggling to stay in the faith. And then there is also the problem of the hidden God, a problem which I hope to address in another video or video series. Let me now share my slides. The theme of today's message is bad outcomes by intelligent design. Bad outcomes by intelligent design. And again, this is part 2 that deals with the problem of evil. This coming Sunday is Superbowl Sunday. It is one of the most sacred annual sporting events, the Super Bowl. This is the culmination of 32 teams in the USA's National Football League competing to become the ultimate champion for the football year. Only one team out of the 32 teams will end up happy at the end of the football year. Why would intelligent agents like human beings create situations where some people end up happier than others? Or why create a situation where there's guaranteed unhappiness for most of the teams, the 31 teams, so that one team can be happy? With a little thought, one can see how the creation of bad outcomes in human affairs, such as sporting events, is extensible to a creator God allowing bad outcomes for his creation. There are other aspects of this sporting example that should also be considered. Something becomes valuable when it is not guaranteed to everyone. And the meaning of something good becomes more meaningful because of the possibility and or existence of something bad. I'll develop these ideas a little bit more later, but first let me summarize what I presented in part 1 as it's relevant to part 2. Oh, by the way, yes, this is bad outcomes by intelligent design, and alternatively said, you could say it's intelligently designed bad outcomes. But let me summarize part 1. The central theme in part 1 is 2 Corinthians 4:17. For this momentary light affliction is building for us an eternal weight of glory far beyond all comparison. Another way of thinking about it, which I'll elaborate more briefly, is initial tragedy is an essential part of happily ever after. Or alternatively, happily ever after is meaningful because of the possibility and existence of tragedy. This idea was highlighted. I tried to explain the idea by appealing to a fairy tale. So here is the tragedy. Here is Snow White. She's lying in a casket because she died. The evil queen, her evil queen stepmother, killed her. And here are the dwarfs here mourning her passing. And there is the prince who sees the girl of his dreams who's passed away. Now the story, so that's the tragedy in the story, this passing of Snow White. But the story has a happy ending because she comes back to life. Snow White comes back to life, and the prince kills the evil queen stepmother. And they get married and live happily ever after. Now, interestingly enough, there is kind of a gospel, there are hints of the gospel message in this fairy tale. It should be quite evident It parallels the gospel message where in the gospel message, the hero, Jesus Christ, is also himself resurrected, and his damsel in distress, the church, is resurrected. The evil serpent is thrown into hell, is destroyed, and they have Jesus Christ and his bride have a wedding at the end of time. That's an interesting parallel to this fairy tale here. Interesting parallel. I'd argue that it's kind of interesting that the gospel message seems ingrained, bits and pieces of the gospel message, not in its entirety, is ingrained in the collective consciousness. It seems somewhere in the human consciousness that the idea of a afterlife, of a resurrection, can make sense of all the bad that's happening to us. I don't think that that's accidental, that these things start to be expressed in our fairy tales and in our stories. There's an element of the truth that is ingrained in our collective consciousness that sort of somehow sees that the way that evil is made sense of is because of a resurrection event. In fact, someone who studied literature, who used to be an atheist and became a Christian, he said this: a young man who wishes to remain a sound atheist, that is, a committed atheist, a young man who wishes to remain a sound atheist cannot be too careful of his reading. And this is by C.S. Lewis, who was an atheist and became a Christian, because he was careful of his reading, and he began to see that many things that he was reading was pointing to a higher reality, that there seemed to be a real message there in all these fictional stories, that it was echoing the very deeply ingrained desires of humanity. And I don't think that those desires were an accident. It may be that the gospel message, the pieces of it that were in these stories are distorted, but there was still something there, and he could see, and C.S. Lewis could see this. So again, this is the Snow White story, and it has a happy ending. And that was my way of explaining 2 Corinthians 4:17. For this momentary light affliction is building for us an eternal weight of glory, far beyond all comparison. One way that I stated it in my own words is, a little tragedy at the start makes meaningful happily forever after. Or alternatively, again, happily forever after is made meaningful by a little tragedy at the start, especially if there is a resurrection event. And there was a resurrection event in this fairy tale. So, one thing I need to mention is this verse in 2 Corinthians. It applies only to Christians. It does not apply to non-believers. For the Christian, there is meaning in the suffering in this world because it leads to something much better. For the non-believer suffering in this world, there's not much explanation or consolation for them, because they'll suffer in this world, and after they die, they'll go from bad to worse. I'm sorry I have to convey this sad news, but I'm just telling you like it is. It's my responsibility to do that. So going back now to the Superbowl, it illustrates that bad outcomes could be by intelligent design. There is no reason why intelligent design should guarantee only good outcomes for the things that are designed. Also, something becomes valuable when it is not guaranteed to everyone. And something of value, and this is yet another take, something of value becomes even more valuable when it is not guaranteed. So that's just to show, I mean, the principle I'm illustrating there is that just because there are bad outcomes doesn't mean that it's not intelligently designed. We have examples where bad outcomes are part of the game, part of the intelligent design. And so we can perhaps think now a little bit more out of the box when we're confronted with this question: why did God create paradise and throw a snake into the Garden of Eden? I said earlier, one way that we frame the problem of evil is with this question: why would a good God create a world that is full of evil? The typical Christian response, and one that misses the mark, is, well, God created a good world, but then Adam sinned and messed it all up. The real question that's being asked is, why did God create paradise and then throw a snake into the Garden of Eden? That's the real question. It's not, yes, it is true, God created a good world, but why throw a snake into the Garden of Eden? And there is one way that this is pictured where there's the devil, who is the snake, and he's tempting Eve to sin. And there's also another aspect of this that is troubling, and it troubled me for most of my life. Why didn't God send Satan to hell before creating Eden? If Satan sinned and God sent Satan to hell, then Eve wouldn't have ever been tempted, and we would be living happily ever after, right? So why did this happen? Before I answer that question, let me just briefly point out, what was Adam and Eve's real sin? Was it eating the forbidden fruit? Well, sort of yes, but at a deeper level, it was the sin of the heart. They wanted to be God, and they were going to try to become God. That desire is still with humanity in various and often subtle forms. It's not usually very overt. Just a rhetorical question. Would Adam and Eve be willing to fight and kill God if they had become God? Look at the Pharisees. They are Adam's offspring. They illustrate the desire to subjugate God to human whims. The seeds of the Pharisaic evil trace all the way back to Adam and Eve, and ultimately the devil. So now let me try to answer this question. Why did God put a snake in the Garden of Eden? And it was only a few years ago I stumbled on an answer. It's from Deuteronomy 13. It says, if a prophet or a dreamer of dreams arises among you and gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or wonder that he tells you comes to pass, and if he says, let us go after other gods, which you have not known, and let us serve them, you shall not listen to the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams. For the Lord your God is testing you to know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. For the Lord your God is testing you to know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. And so this explains what I'd like to point out. This parallels what happened in Eden. So this commandment was given to the children of Israel after they were liberated from the land of Egypt, and they were on their way to the promised land. And so you could say that the promised land is a parallel, an analogy to Eden. And yet, even in this promised land, God said, if a prophet or dreamer of dreams arises among you and gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or wonder that he tells you comes to pass, and if he says, let us go after other gods which you have not known, and let us serve them, you shall not listen to the words of that prophet or dreamer of dreams. God is going to let this play out, where basically these are snakes, these are evil people. He's going to let them come in to the flock and to tempt, to test these people. The Lord specifically says, for the Lord God is testing you. For the Lord your God is testing you to know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. God was looking for true love. God was looking for true love. So a lot of people that have looked at the problem of evil, they look at it from the standpoint of the creatures, the standpoint of mankind. It's kind of anthropocentric, if we might use a fancy word. But the mistake is creation is not about the welfare of the creatures, that is mankind. It's about the creator. The creator was made for the sake of the creation was made for the sake of the creator, not the creatures. Let that sink in. Creation was made not for the benefit of the creatures. It was made for the benefit of the creators. So many of the framing of the problem of evil is framed in terms of the creatures rather than the creator. They're getting it totally wrong. So when I hear these atheist websites and they're talking about, well, why would God make it so miserable for the creatures? They totally don't get it. The creator was looking for true love. Humans understand the search for true love. The creator risked a creation that could self-destruct. The search for love risks rejection. Just like we have the Super Bowl where there is a risk of losing. That's what makes the Super Bowl valuable, because there is risk there that something could go wrong for the people seeking to become champions. That is just a strange property of reality, that something becomes valuable when it can be put at risk. I can't explain it. That's just seems to be the way it is. The welfare of the creatures are not the purpose of the creation. The purpose of the creation is the good pleasure of the creator. Maybe one way to illustrate this is fireworks are made by human creators. Fireworks self-destruct. Should a firework complain, you made me self-destruct, or you gave me the capacity to self-destruct? The fireworks are not, fireworks are not made for the benefit of the firework. I mean, that should be plainly obvious, but yet we apply the same logic that, oh, goodness, if there's a problem of evil, the issue is, well, the creator didn't build creation for the benefit of the creatures, therefore that's not intelligent design. People who argue that totally don't get it. So this is a picture of fireworks self-destructing. They are not made for the benefit of the firework. Fireworks are made for the benefit of the creator. Now this verse kind of really says more of the theme of the point I was really trying to get at. And this is a troubling verse. It's it was written by the Apostle Paul under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. This is Romans 9:19 through 23. It says, "You will say to me then, why does he, that is God, why does he still find fault? For who can resist his will? But who are you, O man, to answer back to God? Will what is molded say to its molder, why have you made me like this? Has the potter no right over the clay to make out of the same lump one vessel for honorable use and another for dishonorable use? What if God, desiring to show his wrath and to make known his power, has endured with much patience vessels of wrath prepared for destruction, in order to make known the riches of his glory for vessels of mercy, which he has prepared beforehand for glory?" So I'll highlight what was part of what's in bold. It says, God desiring to show his wrath and make known his power. So yes, God desires to show his wrath and his power. And one way he'll do it, it says in 2 Peter 3:7, the heavens and earth that now exist are stored up for fire. So toward the end of time, there's going to be a tremendous fireworks show, one that God is eager to display, to show his wrath and his power. So yes, God is eager to show his love as well, but he also, the Bible teaches, he desires to show his wrath and his power. That should make us fear and tremble. This is a picture of Hiroshima. On the left, when the bomb exploded, on the right is Nagasaki. Now, around right here, I'll show you where ground zero, that's ground zero. And so the bomb exploded right in this region. And I'll show you a picture of where on the ground it exploded. And it's right over this building here. That's considered ground zero. And you could see all the rubble and just the carnage that befell that city and its inhabitants. It's very tragic and sad. And please don't take what I'm about to say too literally, but just kind of a metaphor. Something can be built up out of the ashes. Here is the same building here, this building here, perhaps from a different perspective. It looks from a different angle. And here it is right here. But you could see that the city has been built up and it's beautiful. It's beautiful now. In fact, here is a picture of Hiroshima at night. And I'm not trying to minimize the suffering of the people that had died in Hiroshima, but still, metaphorically, we could say that a bad situation can be rebuilt and redeemed. And in the ultimate sense, that's true if there is a resurrection. This is just a rebuilding of a city, but if there is a resurrection of the dead, then everything can be rebuilt. The theme of rebuilding something is part of the reality TV series Flip or Flop, where the house flippers take junk houses and make them beautiful. That's part of the appeal. And one could speculate that they could even make it more beautiful than the original creation of the house. This theme is illustrated in nature on some levels. Pictured in the background is a cherry, and in the foreground is a petrified cherry. Here's a picture of even more petrified cherries. I wanted to show some rotten cherries, but I had problems finding pictures of that. Besides, it would have been really gross. But the idea is that if these rotted cherries, and they're not pitted, if they're thrown in the ground, they can grow, they can be reborn, so to speak, and become trees, and beautiful cherry trees, just beautiful, beautiful. And so the theme of resurrection keeps popping up. And I should, now I'll save the thought. I was going to talk about Ephesians. I'll talk about Ephesians a little later. It says in the Gospels, Jesus said, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Whoever loves his life loses it. And whoever hates his life in this world will keep it for eternal life." So there, Jesus is using pictures of seeds falling into the earth and dying, but then being resurrected. Being resurrected. Paul even specifically refers to a resurrection of the seed dying and having life. This verse has been interpreted also about dying to yourself so you can be more productive in this life. But there are other passages in the Bible that connect the dying seed to a resurrection. And just to repeat the theme with rose seeds, the proper term is rose hips. We can think of the rose seeds or the hips as being the bearers of information, or dare I say, logos. The power of logos is that it can organize matter. It can take that seed, and when it's combined with mere dirt, but then is exposed to light with water and carbon dioxide, it becomes something extraordinarily beautiful. Like this rose. Jesus said, "Consider the lilies of the valley, how they neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, truly I tell you, Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed as one of these." In the 21st century, that saying has far more meaning than any other time in the history of Christendom, because we now understand the gravity of what was being said. The complexity of the cell, of even plant cells, to be able to do what they do, exceeds all the sum total of our technology and knowledge on Earth by several orders of magnitude. Don't be deceived into thinking just because we supposedly do genetic engineering that we could build something like this from scratch. We totally can't. I worked for one of the pioneers of genetic engineering, and he'll tell you the same, that it is beyond all of our technologies. We just kind of tinker with a little bit of the parts and do a few things, but we cannot build something like this from scratch. We can only play a little bit with some of the genes. And I mentioned that I would talk about Ephesians. Ephesians said, God prepared for us works before the foundation of the world. Now that's a very interesting statement. Does that mean that God foresaw the works that we would do today before there was even an Adam and Eve, before they sinned in the garden? Did God know that we would be like here tonight, pondering his creation? That's an amazing thought. And the reason I put that forward is, does that mean that even the metaphors that we see in nature, such as a seed going into the ground and metaphorically dying to have a resurrection, was that part of God's intelligent design to leave us pictures of his power? Just something to think about. So in the age of the apostles, people saw the resurrection miracles. In the 21st century, we have the record that was passed on to us, but we have something else. We have understanding of the Creator's power by studying biology. If he can create life, it becomes very believable that he can recreate life, that he has this power. And so in some ways, we could say that God's given us the ability to believe in a resurrection power just because we can believe in a creator that is powerful enough to make life in the first place from non-living matter. And so the theme that I'm trying to convey is the resurrection. The problem of evil is solved by the resurrection. The problem of evil is made sense of by a resurrection. Jesus said, I am the first and the last and the living one. I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I have the keys of death and Hades. Just highlighting the bolded, he says, I am the living one. I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore. And so this is one way of showcasing intelligent design by creating things with bad materials. So the original creation is great, but recreation from bad rotted materials to something even greater than the original creation shows intelligent design to another level. So we have again this picture with these dead rotted fruit. It's a picture of death, and it's thrown in the ground, and these are base materials just kind of ignored and despised. But then when it's all combined, the power of the information in the seed, that is the power of logos, can create something incredible, more incredible than the way it started. And that's a picture of the resurrection. And we know that in Paul's writings, he connected seeds as a picture of the resurrection. So going back to part one and thinking about evil as personified, let's say by evil characters. In the Bible, it would be the devil. In the story of Snow White, it's the evil queen. The purpose of the evil queen in the story of Snow White. The author of the fairy tale didn't destroy the evil queen immediately. The author saved the evil queen's destruction for around the time of the wedding day of Snow White. And again, this parallels what happens in the Bible, in the New Testament. Satan is just before the wedding happens, he's thrown into hell forever. Ironically, the resurrection of Snow White was actually made possible by the existence of the evil queen, because there's no resurrection without death. So this story is actually made more beautiful because the evil queen was allowed to hang around. And hence, evil intent was turned for a good outcome. It says in Genesis 50:20, As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. So I've tried to illustrate the idea of how evil can be turned around for something good if there is a resurrection event. In the Christian faith, it's not just Snow White, so to speak, the bride being resurrected. It's also Jesus Christ. Jesus' resurrection made possible the resurrection of his bride. And that is really the theme of part 2. What is the answer to the problem of evil? It is the resurrection. It will make sense. It'll turn a terrible story into an incredibly beautiful one, just like, or even really better than the story of Snow White. And we Christians believe that, yes, Snow White is a fairy tale, but reality, the reality of what will happen at the end of time, is even more beautiful than a fairy tale. So that's pretty much it for part 2. I would say I'm going to have a little bit more on the problem of evil in subsequent videos, but I think this part 2, which I shared just now, is the most important of the series. The rest that I may talk about in subsequent talks is going to be a little bit more philosophical and purely nerdy. So if you don't watch those videos, I take absolutely no offense. I'm going to cover things like Shannon's theorem and error correction and ideas taken from music, and maybe a little bit more from literature, and then may even talk about computer languages. So that one might be a little dry, but I'm doing it mostly for completeness because I think it's interesting, kind of in a purely academic sense. Today, I hope that this is more of a touching at the heart level. So that pretty much does it for our time today. I'd like to thank the viewers who joined us today and gave me a chance to share my thoughts. So in the meantime, until we meet again, may the intelligent designer, the creator, the Christian God be with you. Take care and God bless you.